W-2 is a great way to earn income and make some money and live life. But ultimately, as I've learned, there are just other ways to build things outside of that. And W-2 and a W-2 means different things to everybody, but it has its constraints.
There is a new American dream. One that doesn't involve working till you're 65 before you start enjoying life. If you're someone looking for ways to regain control over your time and check off that bucket list now, you're in the right place. We share tips from experts on investing, personal finance, and mindset so that you can finally have the freedom to work less and live more. This is the Freedom Investing Podcast with your host, Kris Toribio.
What's going on, everyone? This is Kris Toribio from the Freedom Investing Podcast, and I'm so happy you're here to join us for another amazing episode. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the show. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date with our latest episodes. Moving on to today's guest, we have Aaron Kreymer. Aaron lives in Baltimore, and professionally, he works in the commercial construction industry in sales and business development roles. And his real estate journey started a little over a year and a half ago at the beginning of 2021, investing in single-family fix and flips in the Baltimore area. At the beginning of 2022, Aaron started to shift his focus to commercial real estate investing and multifamily so that way he can pursue more scalable and effective investment strategies. Aaron is currently an LP in a 120-unit deal in Arizona and is currently pursuing active roles within the commercial real estate industry, specifically multifamily or self-storage. Aaron, welcome to the show, man. Before we dive into it, give us a quick 2-minute rundown of who you are, what your background is, and where you are in your journey to achieving time freedom.
Thanks, Kris. Glad to be here. Pleasure to be here. Excited for the podcast. Quick background. I've been in the construction industry for 8 years. Grew up here in Baltimore. So this is my home. This is my area. So being in the construction industry for 8 years gives me, great background into, the vendor and material, sourcing of construction, and something that I, use to, use in my real estate strategies and investment opportunities. And it served me well in my single family stuff, which is where I started. It's, somewhere where I started because it's simple enough and easy enough. And, it's, properties and opportunities here in the Baltimore area. And I started in real estate, because I really wanted to do something outside of my W-2 and, focus on building something, bigger than that outside of that. And it's been a fantastic journey. It's, meeting new people and learning so many different things. And I'm excited, to talk to you today and learn what you have going on. And, it's excited for the journey as it continues.
That's awesome, man. I always like asking people like how they stepped into the real estate industry because people come from a variety of different backgrounds, right? And in your case, you had a competitive advantage there. You were in the construction industry to begin with. You had the network of individuals, you had the vendors, you had an understanding of the construction process. And so single family fix and flips is what you got started in. At what point did you decide, you know what, I enjoy this, but actually multifamily and commercial real estate is really the niche that I want to focus on moving forward?
Yeah. So for single family, I've done 2 properties, but it was enough for me to understand where the pros and cons were. And so it's really when I was looking for my second property, which, and it takes time, it's a specific market. It's a niche market. You have to, do a lot of research and find that right fit. Just within the Baltimore area. And as I was doing my research and, underwriting properties and looking at different areas, I just started to realize that it just wasn't as scalable as I wanted. And, when I first started out, I had high, big dreams and high hopes, for it to pan out pretty quickly. And it just wasn't the case. And I started to understand why and that it just wasn't going to go where I wanted it to go. And so at that point, multifamily just kind of fell out of nowhere. And, it was an intriguing idea, and it was an idea that sat with me for a little bit until I started to really pursue it. Now, that was really at the beginning of 2022 when I started to get into it, and so now I really see the difference between single family and multifamily. It's a completely different game. And so it was right around that time when I was looking for my second one where I just the wheel started to turn. I started to realize that there's got to be something better than this.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, we can really resonate when it comes to the differences between single family fix and flips and multifamily. Just the construction process alone, right? I mean, it really does feel like another job, and it truly is another job because the moment you stop doing that, the moment the money and the additional cash flow stops coming in. And so we transitioned to multifamily for that very reason, is that once you put that initial work in, which is a lot, at least at the end of the day, you still get to keep that asset and benefit from the tax deductions, the appreciation, the loan pay down, and the cash flow that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get with single family fix and flips.
Yeah, there's so many different benefits that come into play.
Absolutely. And is your market still going to be Baltimore, or are you looking at being an active investor in other specific areas?
I'm looking in other areas. People ask me that question all the time. It's a great question, and I think with multifamily specifically, you can expand. You can get into different markets. I'm able to move around a little bit and have the opportunity to be in different markets. So I think just focusing on Baltimore would be a mistake. I think that there are much better areas geographically, different markets, which I think need to be paid attention to. So I'm looking at, probably, Georgia, the Carolina markets, and maybe the Ohio markets. And with the connections that I've made and relationships that I've built, it makes it possible. You get to know people in different markets and you can learn about different markets. It doesn't have to be just, stuck to one specific area, which I think limits opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah, you make a really good point in that you invest where there's opportunities, right? It's like we're over here in Chicago at the same time, and everything from the landlord tenant laws, everything from the crime, and there's opportunities here. Don't get me wrong, but when it comes to seeing where there's other opportunities, where there's a much higher net population growth, job growth, median household income continues to rise, supply and demand imbalance, and where there's opportunities to continue to drive rents if needed. Um, it really does a lot of favor in making sure that you build those relationships where those opportunities make sense. And that's really
Yep.
smart of
Yep.
you.
Yeah, what I always tell people is, it's really the people that's the important factor, and to build relationships with the right people to create a team that has the same vision, the same goals, the same drive, to be able to create things which you can do in different markets. And so finding the right team is really the ultimate thing. And then after that comes finding a good market to invest in.
So you are currently invested as a limited partner in a 120 unit deal in Arizona. At what point did this come about? And was this part of your transition into the commercial multifamily space?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Just as I started getting into, commercial real estate, multifamily, I wanted to get involved, and the question was how. And as it's well known, there's different opportunities. It can be an LP, GP, it can be a JV, it can be a KP. There's a lot of different acronyms that come into play of what you can do in your involvement. And obviously, the hope is to be actively involved on a GP role or JV role, but without much experience on that side of things, it's hard to jump right into it. So as I started to learn about it, the LP opportunity, came to light, and I started to learn about that. And I talked to different operators, saw a couple of different deals, and understood that that was probably a great way for me to get started. It's a more hands-off role, but it's a role where you can look at a property, you can ask questions, you can look at a contract, see how that process goes. And so I figured that that would be the best way to just get into it and get started and go from there. And so I talked to a couple of different operators, looked at some different deals, found something that made sense that I was comfortable with, and just jumped into it. Without giving it too much hesitation, because if you give it too much thought, you think too much, and you get stuck not doing anything. So it was, yeah, that thing that propelled me to really start that journey.
Absolutely, and you're right. Analysis paralysis is a real thing, and we always tell people, develop a foundation of education and understanding of what it is that you're getting into, but you don't have to understand necessarily all of the potential things that can go wrong because it's nearly impossible to do without actually jumping into it. And at some point, you just have to make that jump and invest or do what it is that you want to do and learn along the way. So that's great. As far as your takeaways from that, what what did you do to kind of position yourself to where you felt comfortable investing coming from a background of single family fix and flips?
So in this instance, the single family fix and flip background, um, I would say provides some good foundation for this, but ultimately, multifamily commercial real estate is very different. And so, single family is it's just single family jumping to commercial real estate is a different animal. So it provides good, foundation in terms of, process of, capex, how to understand the flow of the project and what needs to get done for it to be finished and be a product. Um, but I still had to learn kind of, the process, which was different from multifamily. And so that really entailed talking to people, asking questions, and understanding, what went on. Because like we said earlier, with single family, it's a very different strategy. Unless if you're doing renting, that's maybe somewhat similar. But in fix and flips, you're buying, you're rehabbing, and you're selling and getting rid of the asset. Whereas with multifamily, it's a very different process, and the strategy is you do the capex, you hold, there's returns, and all the different benefits that come into play. So it's different, and so it took a little bit of questions and answers and getting some comfortable feeling with it.
Right, right. And even the analysis itself, right? As a single family fix and flips, a lot of times we use this thing called the 70% rule, where you kind of get an idea of what that value of the asset will be after you renovate it. And your purchase price is going to be somewhere around the 70% range of what that purchase price is going to be. So that way, at least you can factor in a buffer for the rehab cost, the holding cost, the closing costs, things of that sort. But multifamily is definitely a bit different, right? Because you have to factor in now, since you're going to hold the asset, what are the taxes going to be? What is the typical utilities, things of that sort. And there's a lot of different metrics to take into consideration, especially when you go into multifamily and commercial real estate.
Yeah, thankfully, as a passive investor, I don't have to worry about that too much. But those are good things to be aware of, as getting more active.
Absolutely. Apart from that, as a passive investor, when it came to deciding not just the deal, but the sponsor you wanted to invest in, how did you go about deciding and making that decision?
So that's a great question. Also, I talked to a number of different operators. I would say 4 or 5, and there are so many of them, and they all have different deals, and they all look different in some sort of fashion. And so what it came down for me was in terms of what the deal context was, so what the returns look like, and what's also really important is really just the presentation of what they're offering to me. And the third thing, which is probably the most important, is communication. And so, I spoke to different operators, and one of the operators just I felt a lot more comfortable with. They were easy to reach. They answered my questions diligently. They have a great presence on social media. You can really see kind of what they're involved in, and they have a lot going on. So there's really that comfortability factor of knowing what they're doing, that they're easy to get in touch with, that they can answer my questions, and that they, whatever my question is, whether it's, a good question or maybe I missed something and I'm just asking a dumb question, they were easy to talk to and answer my questions and made me feel comfortable. So those are the couple of things that really stood out with them. And that's really ultimately why I chose them.
Very cool. And was there any input in terms of the location you wanted to invest in as well? Because as we know, Arizona is a great market, but did you already know that coming into it as a limited partner?
Yeah, I think I follow different operators on social media, mostly just LinkedIn, and just talking to people, understanding how different markets are doing. And Arizona was definitely on the radar, and so when that came up, it wasn't a surprise to me that that they were in Arizona and they deal primarily in that area. So I knew that it had good potential, being that it's an area.
Very cool. And I also want to kind of briefly touch base on the other asset class that you're interested in investing in within the commercial real estate space, and that's self-storage. How did you kind of transition into wanting to invest in that asset class as well?
So, multifamily was the first thing that came into play. I would say just over a year ago. Like I mentioned, as I was looking at that second single family property, and when I started to get involved in the commercial real estate space, multifamily was really the only thing that I knew about. That people talked about those. That's what I was focused on as I was learning. Different asset classes. A, B, C, whatever it is. And then as I started to get further and further in the journey and build more relationships and talk with people and networking events, I started to realize that there are other opportunities within, the commercial real estate world, being, office space, medical space. You can be involved in RV parks. You can be involved in mobile home parks, self-storage. And it was cool to learn that there's just much more beyond the multifamily, sector. And, I want to, be able to be efficient in what I'm doing. And so I wanted to maybe, besides multifamily, look at something else that, I can also be involved in. And self-storage is very unique just because it's, it limits the tenant factor, which I know is a pain point for all investors involved with that sector, multifamily or anywhere else where there are tenants. And being in the construction industry, and even those who aren't, understand that how they're built are very different than the multifamily properties, in that they are much more sturdy, and long-term construction. And so those are just a couple of things that stood out to me, and made sense to me. And I've talked to different investors involved in that space, and multifamily has some pros and cons, and certainly self-storage does too. But some of the major cons which exist within multifamily aren't so much there with self-storage in terms of just what they represent, the people who actually utilize them, the markets that they're in. And so to me, that self-storage market started to push itself, up in terms of standing out, as being another interesting market to look into, sector to look into.
Absolutely, man. And the point I want to drive home here is that there's a ton of different ways that you can be successful when it comes to commercial real estate. A lot of it is just deciding what kind of resonates with what your goals are, what you feel you understand a bit better, and what's your competitive advantage, and kind of just focusing on those niches, right? There's a ton of different ways to be successful. As healthcare providers coming from that space, we also believe that senior housing is also another important asset class, just with the growing population of seniors and the baby boomers starting to retire, people living longer. And so we felt we understand that industry. There's an operational component that we also understand. But ultimately, it just depends on what your background is and where you feel comfortable.
Yeah, like you mentioned, there's so many ways to use your money. And that's what's intriguing to me. That besides just multifamily and different asset classes within that, you can just do so much. If you want to, use your money, to use your money to grow more money. If you want to be really efficient with it, there's just many, many opportunities.
Absolutely. And so now, as apart from a limited partner, you're also looking to become active, right? So from an active role, as we know, real estate is a team sport. And so a lot of times the way partnerships tend to develop is there's this synergistic relationship between all of the different partners, and that they bring a lot of different values and backgrounds to the table. In your case, you have this commercial construction background. I guess where do you kind of see yourself being positioned within an active role in the commercial real estate space on a deal?
Sure. So I definitely believe, like you just mentioned, that the commercial construction background is what serves me well. Understanding the schedule, the relationships, the material, the budgeting. I talked to some people who are great from in the finance field. They come from finance, and underwriting is their thing. Where maybe they're just great capital raisers because they're friends with a lot of millionaires. But construction is something that they don't feel comfortable with. And so I can confidently say that it's served me really well, doing my single family stuff where it's just not daunting. It's, I'm able to jump into it, know what needs to be done, and get it done. And so I hope to utilize that in terms of, being on an active, team, providing my background on, whatever it is, going to due diligence or actual, properties that are active, providing my background and knowledge in terms of serving that team, and being able to, add value in that aspect. But at the same time, it's about the team, and so I'm willing to, do whatever it takes. Now, I'm taking a current capital raising course, which I think is going to be really fantastic to just, brush up on those skills because there's a lot that goes into that as well. So ultimately, I think, I'd like to offer whatever I can, but definitely my background in construction is what, I think serves me well in terms of adding value to a team.
That's awesome. And from a construction management standpoint, that's definitely a huge value add, especially when a lot of times there is some sort of construction component to the business plan. So I think that'd be huge.
That's the hope.
All right, folks. So we're coming towards the end of today's show, but before we finish, it is time for the Freedom Five. These are 5 questions that we ask every guest on our show, starting with the most important question. What is your why? What is the underlying motivation behind everything it is that you do?
So the why is the way I define it is the W-2 is a great way to earn income and, make some money and live life. But ultimately, as I've learned, there are just other ways to build things outside of that. And W-2 and a W-2 means different things to everybody, but it has its constraints. So the why is to build, through real estate, build freedom, time freedom. And what it comes from is money freedom, and that equals time freedom. So that's the ability to do things that I want to do, family, give back to the community, and be able to, spend time on things that I want to do. And so that's the ultimate why. And that's something that I defined early on and is an important driving factor.
That's great. And really what it comes down to is the freedom of choice, right? Having the financial freedom allows you the time freedom, and that gives you the freedom to do what it is that you want to do at any given point. So that's powerful. Number 2, what book has had the largest influence on your life?
So this is an interesting one. There are so many books in the real estate, industry, in real estate space that people have recommended and read, and I've read, a whole bunch of them. But the one book which I would say has had the most influence as of now is a book written by Guy Raz. Guy Raz is an NPR host, and he hosts a podcast called How I Built This. And he wrote a book based off that. And the podcast is him interviewing entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes, and their journeys. And have you heard of this podcast?
I haven't, no.
So it's one of my favorite podcasts because it's so down to earth and really shows the journey that some people take in all kinds of industries. And it could be something as big as JetBlue Airways and how that came to be, or some, small popcorn mom and pop, brand that, people eat. And so the view into how that journey goes is really fantastic. So he wrote a book based off that podcast, which I read. And just at that time, I was considering getting involved in real estate. I was considering doing different things, but I lacked the confidence. I was certain that those who start their own business in whatever sector, business sector it is, are some sort of certified geniuses, that they just have, leg up on everybody else, that they're able to do it and others can't. And I lacked the confidence to do it. And he wrote that book and I read it, and it made a profound impact on me where I realized, that it's not the case, that you just need to have a certain passion. You just need to want to do certain things, and you're never going to know everything, and you just jump into it and you learn as you go. And that book truthfully had that impact where after I read it, I started to invest in real estate, started a company, and started looking for a property, and shortly after purchased a property. And so, even though it's not real estate related, that really, as of now, is what propelled me to start what I'm doing and has led me down the path I'm going down.
I love that, man. And you make a really good point there in that a lot of times the barrier to taking action towards someone's goals is really at the top of the noggin there. It's mindset, right? And having some sort of person in your team or having someone in your corner where keeps you accountable, motivates you, shifts the way in which you think. It can be really life-changing when it comes to actually taking action towards something that can change the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's a simple concept, but it really does a lot.
So number 3, what is the most impactful thing, whether it be a piece of technology, a habit, or a person that has helped when it comes to freeing up your time?
So I think I'm going to choose a habit here. And the habit is really thinking of myself differently. What I mean by that is, working a W-2, working a 9 to 5, you think of yourself as, an expert or, just in that field. And being involved in real estate and wanting to really focus on what we described, the why and the time factor. I've needed to shift my focus into understanding that I'm more than just that. And, realizing that I've already, been in real estate for a little bit and I have an expertise sort of, in certainly the single family space and as I learn and grow in the multifamily space. And so I view myself as one who has something to offer, one who has some knowledge and skill in that. And so that's, I think, an important habit to, a certain mindset to have in order to be able to really focus on the right things, which I think was something I lacked early on and something I'm still developing, but something I realize is an important factor in having that correct mindset to be able to get to where you want to get to.
Absolutely. When it comes to being able to shift your identity is something that I initially struggled with as well. We had one of my colleagues on as one of our podcast guests. His name is Ryan Johnson. He's another nurse anesthetist. And the process that he described himself going through is understanding, no, I'm no longer a nurse anesthetist, but I'm actually a real estate investor who happens to be a nurse anesthetist. And the way in which you shift your mindset and believing that you are first a real estate investor, and then you are what you formerly used to be, or whatever that may be, can make a drastic impact in the way in which you think about yourself, and then which will then translate to the type of actions that you choose to take and how you introduce yourself to others.
Yeah, Ryan was actually he's a friend of mine. I've talked to him a few times, and he a while ago stressed that to me as well. And that's when those wheels started to turn. Of hey, I need to think a little differently.
It's impactful.
Yeah.
Number 4, what is your number one piece of advice you would give to anyone looking to achieve more control over their time?
First thing I'm going to say is patience. It takes time. Whether you're doing it actively, whether you're doing it passively, um, you know, I think people, and myself included, have a vision of grandeur where it's overnight, it's success, it's you do things and voila, you have a lot of money. But whatever you're doing, whether it's active or passive, it just takes time to learn what you're doing, to do it right, to do it with the right people. So this is a three-pronged answer. The first thing is patience. The second thing is asking questions. There's a lot of things that people don't know. Nobody knows everything, and so it's important to not be afraid to ask those questions of the experts in that field, specifically in real estate. And the third thing is ambition. To dream for big things. Wake up thinking about those big things, and that's how you accomplish those things.
That's the beauty of it, right? And when it comes to entrepreneurship, yes, it is an adventure that not many people choose to undertake. It's a test of how much you're willing to endure, right? As you said, it's not an overnight success thing. It really is just a culmination of doing small, steady actions towards your progress on a day-by-day basis. And at some point or another, as long as you continue to take that action and move that needle forward, you're going to gain some traction there, and you'll be able to achieve that level of success you've been wanting to, but it doesn't happen overnight. So that's definitely huge, is making sure that you stay consistent with all of that.
Yeah, I learned that early on. I was sure it was going to happen quickly, and it just, it's not.
Yeah. And especially in this day and age too, where everything is so instant, right? I mean, you have social media, you can kind of just scroll nonstop and change to a different topic if you want to. You can search different things. Internet's faster than it's ever been before. You don't have to wait for a website to load. You don't even have to dial in. I remember when we had to dial in, it's like, just getting on the internet itself took 5 minutes, right?
Yep. Those are the good old days. So we used to buffer, to get, load a YouTube video, and now it's instantaneous. So with real estate, there's a lot of buffering.
Oh yeah,
it's a weight factor.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, just deal with the buffering and understand that this is what you're going to have to go through. The fifth and final question that we have here is, what is the best way for our listeners to get in contact with you?
So one could definitely email me. I think my email would be in the show notes. It's aaronk@kmrventures.com. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a super powerful tool. For many years, before I got involved in real estate, I was a LinkedIn lurker, as they call it, where I had an account. I was, looking at people, watching people, but you didn't hear a peep from me. But as I've gotten into real estate and utilize LinkedIn, it's just a tremendous platform. So I love to just connect with people, comment on people's posts, interact with people, and you can always shoot me a message and connect with me there.
I love it, man. Aaron, lots of great information today. I really like how you talked about the way you shifted your mindset between going from a single family investor into a commercial real estate investor, the process that you described when it comes to trying to vet out an additional sponsor that you'd want to invest in and what that typically looks like, as well as the overall shift in what you can bring to the table, understanding, taking an inventory of what it is that you can do based off of your background and seeing where you can provide value to a partnership. I just want to thank you again for being a fantastic guest on our show, and I look forward to remaining in touch. Now, if you like this show and want to learn more about how we can help you free up your time through passive real estate investments, check out www.freedominvesting.com. Make sure to subscribe to our monthly newsletter and schedule an introductory call with our team. We also have a free 7-day course on what passive real estate investing is and how to get started so that you can start your journey towards earning back more time in your life. To all of our amazing listeners here on the Freedom Investing Podcast, my name is Kris Toribio. Till next time.